Last but hopefully not least, I can't believe that I actually have to follow Thomas Edison, but I'll do my best. We have a really diverse group up here of innovators and design experts, and I'm privileged to be here with them and with all of you. I am the personal tech columnist at USA Today, which really means I'm the guy who gets to review products, new iPad, digital camera, computer, whatever. It's a fun job. And I get to be kind of the proxy for the consumer and figure out, would I buy this thing? What's wrong with it? What's right with it? That sort of thing. And one of the things that I look at just as a consumer is design. Now, to me, design is as basic as, what does it look like? Is it usable? Is it something that my mom could use or my kid could use or whomever? So in a minute, we're going to hear how these guys define design and design thinking, because it obviously means different things to different people. But we really do have an expert panel here. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves because they know who they are and what they've done and what they bring to this better than I do. But suffice to say, we have Scott, and we have Tony, and we have Nick, and we have Karen. And I'm going to start with you. We'll just go in order. Quickly just explain why you're here. I think most people know that from looking at the program and just knowing all of your reputations. But give me a quick, let's do it quick. And then I'm going to just encourage discussion, and hopefully we can get a dialogue going. It is the end of the day, and it's been fascinating all day to hear from everybody, and hopefully you'll agree that these guys are fascinating as well. Scott?
Hello, my name is Scott Wilson. I'm the founder and principal of Minimal in Chicago. After years of working for a lot of companies from Nike to Motorola and IDEO a couple times as well, I started Minimal in 2007, and we're kind of a design product development firm that also incubates our own products. So we work with a lot of big companies ranging from Xbox. We did the Xbox Connect, Steelcase, and all down to startups like we have a bunch of med tech startups that we work with. But then we also incubate, to balance out the business, we also incubate some of our own products. I've had unfortunately about 4 startups from my wife, and varying levels of success, and actually now leveraging things like Kickstarter to kind of get things off the ground.
I'm Tony Fidel. I'm CEO and founder of Nest. We are the learning thermostat company. Hopefully, as I heard, making thermostats sexy, a crazy idea. Actually, I started out in Silicon Valley about 22 years ago, and with building personal digital electronics for a company called General Magic, and then for Philips, and then at Apple, where for 9 years I was in charge of the iPod division, as well as the first 3 generations of the iPhone. And so been just building and designing handheld and now wall-mounted products.
Hi, I'm Nick Pudar. I run business development at OnStar, and OnStar's interesting, innovative safety service that has been around for about 16 years now. And I've been engaged in that business for most of the time. And we bring a lot of innovative things, but one of the other things that struck me through most of the discussion today, and last night at the opening reception, Tom mentioned to the group that I'm an avid magician, very serious magician, and it struck me that the whole process of designing magic is actually synonymous with good design thinking that we've talked about here, and so I'll have to reflect on that quite a bit. And I'm also an avid customer of Nest, and thermostats are sexy.
Thank you.
Well, I better follow the sexy theme. I'm Karen Elinardo, the founder and CEO of CSRware, which stands for Corporate Social Responsibility Software. And what we try to make sexy is sustainability and environmental data. So what we've done, I actually incubated the company in school. So I grew up in Silicon Valley as well, worked for Electronic Arts for our Xbox guy, worked in software development for things like EA Sports, and another online.com type of email hosted company. So I spent a lot of time in software, and I wanted to do something a little different. I got a little itch and went back to school to get my master's in environmental science. and incubated CSRware while I was in school. Maybe 3 classes into it, I recognized quickly that there were really brilliant scientists in the room, but there was no way to convey the message back to corporate America. So we designed a software tool that takes sustainability, energy, water, greenhouse gas emission type of data for internal operations all the way across your supply chain, and we help companies make business decisions and turn into business intelligence. So that's what we're up to.
Okay, well, I'm going to start with either the easiest question of the day or the hardest question of the day. What is design? What is it? I mean, we all look at it differently. As I said, as a reviewer, I look at it aesthetically. I look at it from a usability point of view. What the heck is it that we're here talking about? We'll start with you, Scott. We'll just go
All right.
down the...
Yeah, no, that is probably the hardest question of the day. People, I mean, I think a lot of times design's kind of been minimized as far as a term to like think superfluously about the look of the object, and I think it's a lot deeper than that. And a lot of companies will kind of take design and say they have it. It's a checkbox on the list. Oh, I have design. Now I'm off to this,
Right.
and it needs to be much more like the way that Nest approaches it. Like it's pretty easy actually to design a nice looking thing on the wall, but it's how do you make it emotionally connect with the user so that they're going to pay $250 for this thing that they didn't care about for the last 20 years, and it has a lot to do about the meaningful connection and how you give back like information that means something that you feel good about, like I'm saving energy, that I can control this thing and make it more convenient from my iPhone. So it's way we look at it now is like if a project comes in the door and it's just about styling something, we're not really that interested in it. So it has to have a connected brand or connected consumer experience that starts to glue all these dots together and make it a much more sustainable, long-term kind of connection with the consumer. Otherwise, you're in and out in the market, and like, I mean, we've worked on projects where it's like 18 months of development, it shows up on Engadget, and it's the hottest thing for the few days, and then the next greatest thing comes out, and you're like, well, what was all that effort for? So I think when you have that kind of connected, very deep, more meaningful kind of approach to design, then you can sustain yourself a lot better in the market.
Tony, you want to weigh in on that?
Sure, absolutely. Well, thanks for the comments. I approach design or think about design in almost I guess I can articulate a little bit better now that I finished reading a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. I recommend all of you to read that. And that book teaches you all about 2 different ways you think. And one is about kind of the emotional gut sense that you get from something, and maybe those intuitions are right, maybe they're wrong. And what it shows through this book that those intuitions are typically wrong. But then there's this deeper side, this deep connection to things, deep connections to ideas and decision making that are really impactful. And it's when you dive into your design orientation and you use that part of your brain to make your decisions, not just what's flashy and fun, but something that has deep meaning. Then you can actually experience that through the sense of just that reaction, and it's deeper than that. So I encourage everyone to read that book because it's very insightful. But also in design, it's about having passion, and it's about each person in the team, not just the set of designers, but the engineers, the marketers, looking at the entire product experience, not just the color of it or the shape or the whizzy graphics. It has to be throughout the product experience, from the time you learn about the product to the time you buy it, unbox it, install it, what have you, and even the customer support. So you have to think through all of those elements to really engage the customer and for them to understand that it's not just about that flashy graphic, but it's about a real belief in what you're trying to accomplish with that product.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the phenomenon of unboxing, unboxing videos. It fascinates me that people are interested in that, but obviously there is a segment that, oh my God, they took it out of the box. It has a cable. It looks like, it's fascinating to me.
People love doing that. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
When they get it right.
Right, right. Nick, we often associate design with cars, of course, but talk about the OnStar approach to design.
Well, so let me start by saying that design is essentially inherently systems thinking. It is about the totality of what needs to get accomplished. And I think, we talk about what's innovative design. Innovative design are those things that have answered really profoundly better questions. Tom mentioned in the last segment, nobody was asking for a $5 cup of coffee. Well, actually, people were asking for or desiring to have a very authentic experience. And it turns out it's $5, and that's okay. And so,
What's the experience? It's not sipping the coffee, or is it?
It's the ambiance. It's the barista. It's the preparation. It's the authentic materials, the equipment. The entire experience has become quite engaged. And so, and part of that is that it's authentic. And so, Alan Kay, actually the father of the PC, said it best. He said, the best way to predict the future is to design it. And so design, again, is a systems thinking approach. And I like to characterize it by thinking about how you play chess. So, I'm a mere human mortal chess player. And I've actually had a chance to meet about 4 or 5 chess masters and ask how they play. And so mere mortals, I'd say most people, they think they see their 16 pieces and they can make a certain number of moves, and then depending upon how far they can think ahead, either they're better or not better than the opponent. But that's not how a chess master plays. A chess master does not look at the choices in front of them like most technology companies look at what technologies they have, what hammer do I wield, what can I do with my hammer. The chess master says, today I'm going to do a checkmate over in this corner with a rook and a bishop. And then once they get that in their mind, they put themselves in that place and they unravel the game backwards. And then they just move the game towards that outcome, and they adjust and adapt and guide themselves. And so I would say that in just about every truly innovative design effort, first of all, the question of what is it that I want is being asked. And then they're able to place their minds there and unravel the situation backwards. So bringing it now to OnStar, you asked sort of how we think about things. This notion of an idealized design, and I guess if I can offer another recommendation of a book, it's by Russ Akov. It's called Idealized Design, and he talks about this process of design thinking and how to implement it. Again, what is it that you want? And so we recently introduced a service called Family Link, and what this does, it allows you to find your loved ones, my teenage daughter, where is she safe, and that sort of a thing. And you implement what you can, and you try to get as close as you can to the ideal design, but you always need to know what is the ideal. So here's my ideal for a curfew tool for my 17-year-old daughter. It's not about, hey, can I find where she is now? Of course, that's a technological necessity right now, but a curfew tool ought to be the following. I can set a parameter that says she needs to be home at 11 o'clock. Now, no matter where she is, the car should know how long it's going to take her to get home safely, and then send her a text message with a 15-minute warning and saying, hey, you better leave in 15 minutes. And then send her a text message with a 10-minute warning, and then one with a 5-minute warning, and then when it's time to leave, say, get your butt in the car. And if she's not, send me a text message, because she may be in harm's way. And as a parent, what matters to me is not so much the curfew, but that she's safe. And so the broader question is about safety and about caring for your loved ones. And so that's how I would design that curfew tool. And I think about it backwards. Now, could we implement it immediately? No, not quite yet, but we'll get there. And so this notion, unless you know what the checkmate's going to be, you're going to be forever staring at your pieces and saying, well, what should I do next? And that's not how you design.
Karen, what does design mean to you in CSR?
Sorry, I'm caught up in that. You're like my Italian father following me around when I was 17 years old. He didn't need technology. He's from the north end of Boston, and he had people on it. So that was innovative thinking, okay? And my dad was also the first remote control guy. So, back in the day when we didn't have remote controls for TVs and we just had the thing that you had to turn, the dial, he created a bamboo stick with a little slice in it, and from the couch you could turn it. And that was the best innovation I ever learned. But anyway, so you use what you have and you go with it, right? You solve a problem. But anyway, in terms of design for CSRware, so, what we did, especially when you're trying to innovate in a very new market, it's very challenging because you don't know what you're trying to design. What is that, right? What's the user experience going to be like? What problem are we trying to solve? So the way we try to solve it is we went out to early adopters in the industry, right? We went to Google, we went to eBay, we went to a a lot of different companies. Electronic Arts, they had no choice because I worked there for 10 plus years, so we got in there for a while. And we basically sat with, customers. I mean, and that's been our whole motto from the get-go, is sit with our customers, design an experience that is effective and useful to them. So it wasn't about us being, the smart engineers behind the door. It was really about our customers' experience, and we continue that today. So we've, developed an innovative technology that provides a lot of flexibility so we can continue to innovate with our customer base as this kind of sustainability thing, right? What we call sustainability, what we call green design, what we call, environmental sustainability, you name it. We call it all kinds of things. So, it's still evolving, right? So we have to continue to innovate. So what we've done is, that's just part of our culture, right? We're all about innovation. We're all about design. And we've got really talented people that think about that. And, we have a sustainability advisory board that has people from, Google and Salesforce and Zynga, people that aren't necessarily in sustainability, but they have a really good concept of how to design for the end user's experience. So, for us, that's been a core way of doing business.
Let's talk about where the quote-unquote design idea or ideas comes from. Who sets the tone, first of all, in the culture? I mean, you come out of Apple, Tony, where, of course, Steve Jobs, is the visionary and had that, reputation. He was hands-on, all that stuff, which I know you experienced firsthand.
Yes.
Does
a
it
wonderful
need to
experience.
come from the top, from the bottom, from your customers? I mean, do you guys say this design is good for you and you're going to love it? Do you listen to the customers and what they want? Where does it come from?
Well, the first thing you have to segment it out design, and for me, I only like to work on products that affect my life, because I can actually figure out what I like and what I don't like. So when you're dealing with maybe a business-to-business sale or something like that, where you're designing for another business, you really need to listen to that customer a lot, because you have to understand what their issues are. And that's one form of design, but that's not where I do it. I love the consumer part, because I can look inside myself, I can understand what's going on with the others, and they can articulate what's happening in their lives and how this might affect them or how it might work. So first, consumer design for me and for our team is absolutely essential, so we can actually bring that to bear in our daily thinking. So we don't have to do a lot of data, right? So we trust in our gut. Now what happens is there are fact-based decisions and there are opinion-based decisions. And there are a lot of design things that you can work with the facts and say, I like this and not that because it fits within these constraints. And so those are easy decisions to make. But then there are opinion-based decisions. And those opinion-based decisions absolutely need one or a set of key trusted people who are absolutely thinking about those opinions and actually stating, this is the way we're going to go. Because there could be 5 different ways of solving it, and they all could be good. But what is the true vision? Where are you going? So you have to have someone who's the end point, who's going to make that decision of which way to go. So it's critical that when a CEO, let's say it's a product-based company, or it's a business-focused company, the CEO has to know what type of company they have. And if they're a business CEO, then they have to trust one person to have the design vision, that they're going to say they're going to make the opinion-based decisions. If it's a product-based CEO, well, then they're the visionary and they really understand what the vision is, and they can articulate exactly what their opinion and why they're going to do it the way they do it. Because it's important when you make an opinion-based decision that you explain to the team why it is the rationale we're deciding this way. What is the vision of the customer? What is the vision of the experience we're trying to have, so the team stays together? So it's not me versus your idea, but here's what we're trying to articulate, so we can better refine the decision-making process for the entire team all the way down the chain. Because if you can actually define that for those individuals, then they can define it for the people working for them.
Right. Scott, you were nodding in agreement there.
No, I definitely, I think I believe ideas can come from anywhere, but ideas are not necessarily a design or an execution or an experience. And I think it usually takes a visionary or somebody with clarity to be able to see how to connect a bunch of ideas to create something that's more compelling. And I think a lot of companies get caught up in maybe they don't have a leadership that's, and a lot of times this leader or this visionary needs to be, I mean, I think there's a good book called, it's a short book, but it's a Whole New Mind by Daniel Pink, which talks about how we've moved from, information, industrial to information to this experience, high-touch age now, and that leaders in the future will be more right-brain, where they can step back and see the whole picture and be able to connect the dots to create these new experiences. And I think, whether you're like I was fortunate enough to work for Mark Parker, who's now the CEO of Nike when I was there, when he was just the president before he got elevated and they kicked Bill Perez out because he wasn't a right-brain leader. And I never actually understood why they brought him in the first place. But, Mark took over, and Mark was probably the best boss I ever had because he just really was in touch with the consumer. He could connect all the dots, and much like Jobs was. And so I think it's very interesting. And then you also have to empower people like Jonathan that, he's the chef, right? He sees the different ideas. You never would want to make a recipe from 100% of all the ingredients that somebody's giving you to, from research to marketing and all that. So you kind of need to know how to put the right recipe together. And, ideas are kind of worthless without execution, and I think you need the right executional team that's empowered to, and I believe in really small teams that are very empowered in order to do that, right? So in a nutshell, I think ideas can come from anywhere, but then you need the right people to be able to put it together into the right recipes.
Absolutely.
Scott or Karen, do you want to weigh in on this?
Or Nick.
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 So, part of it's about boundaries. What are the boundaries that your company or your brand represent? And so, we did a bit of a brand relaunch last year, or actually a year and a half ago. And our tagline is now safely connecting you in ways you never thought possible. And that is an invitation to innovation. And so, our team really thinks hard about, well, what does that mean? And part of the solution is listening to the customers in unique ways. And I liked Mauro Porcini's comments earlier today. You listen to the customer, then you ignore it. And you really think through what should you be doing because you better understand how it would fit into what the brand essence is. And so we do listen to our customers, and one of the things that we've recently announced is we're opening up our APIs to our vehicles to third-party developers so that sort of innovation can extend beyond. And now listening to these creative developers, there's going to be some really exciting things. Now, one of our customers is my wife, and she said, "Oh, you're opening up APIs? Here's what I want you to build me. I want you to build this app for me."
What's the app?
She says when her car gets to a quarter tank of gas, she wants me to get a text message. and I am sure that
And you're not driving it.
Right? Yeah.
He's looking for his daughter.
Yeah. So what are the boundaries? And so if you are really good about articulating the boundaries, the real creativity that exists inside the organization and among your customers can really come forward.
Karen?
Let's see what to add to that. Well, yeah, I think I agree. I mean, I think, it's great to have ideas. I always get worried about analysis paralysis because you can get so caught up in everybody's got an idea about how you should do things differently. And granted, doing it differently is all about innovation. You've got to think about it, but it is about the execution, and it's, what can you really, what can you make tangible? What can you put on the board you're going to be able to monetize? What is it that will really resonate with the customer base that you're trying to sell into? And, ultimately, I think when you're a smaller company, I do think you need a leader. And there's no doubt about it, Steve Jobs was the leader, right? He made the ultimate decisions. And I like to be in that position myself. But anyway, but I do think I think in a smaller company, and I think that's what I get frustrated about sometimes in bigger companies, is sometimes it's harder to be creative, right? Because it's so big and there's no one really corralling all those ideas that you just kind of, get complacent. And what's exciting to me about being in a small startup where you're innovative, you do have the opportunity to kind of explore a lot of different ideas. But it is about, then who has the final say? You have 10 ideas on the table. Which of the 2 do you explore and really go after and, figure out how to execute it?
Yeah, that raises an interesting question, which is when do you grow too big to even handle the process anymore? When do you do it internally? When do you go to an outside consulting firm? I mean, obviously the answer differs from each situation, but give me a sense of that.
Well, if you think about, the largest company in the world right now, they actually do all the design in-house.
Right.
But the reason why they can do that is because it's only focused on 5 product categories, right? So they're extracting the maximum amount of revenue, right, from just a few product lines. When you look at these massive conglomerates with 20,000 products, it's a whole different world. So you have to look at the nature of the beast to understand where design should fit in the.
Why don't more companies, I mean, it sounds simple. Pick 3 products, pick 5 products, and just run with it. Why don't more companies do that?
Because I think it's because they want to dominate market share as opposed to dominate profit share. Right? They're looking at, Wall Street says I need 80% market share or 40% market share. The other competitors have to be drowning, in my market share, basically. And I think that's absolutely the wrong way of thinking. Just what are the 2 or 3 things that you really want to do right and extract the most value for those things?
Yeah.
So Nest is not going to have more than a thermostat, and you're not going to tell me what's coming next.
Well,
but
you don't want to be making $19 thermostats. If you look at the low end of the iPod and look at the low end of the
Right.
iPhone, there's a reason for it.
Sure. But I guess at some point you have to say, this is where I draw the line.
Yeah, exactly. If you can make an incredibly innovative product, absolutely at $19, or you should. But a lot of times in this new technology age, connected products, that's not possible at this stage of the game.
Right.
Yeah, I remember when I was at Motorola for 1 year. You can't go from Nike to Motorola. You might be able to go Motorola to Nike, but I just had an extreme culture shock. But they had so many phones, I couldn't even keep track of them. And then Apple comes out about 6 months into my stay at Motorola with the iPhone, and after beating my head against the wall for trying to convince them it was going to be a success for 6 months, I ended up leaving and getting my iPhone and going to a coffee shop and starting Minimal.
Right.
But it was just, they were even saying publicly that, a $500 touch phone will never work. And I was like, well, you have the Motorola Ming in China that's, resistive. It was touch phone, $500 unsubsidized, and they were selling 2 million units a year in China. So I was like, well, wait a second, we're doing it. Just, I think they were in denial. But they couldn't focus. They didn't have the confidence. I think one of the things I noticed across a lot of my big clients is there's just a lack of confidence. And I think Apple had extreme confidence in their product. They also probably knew that they weren't perfect, that nobody's perfect. But I think Steve was supremely confident that the rest of the bozos running a bunch of other companies weren't going to get it right? So, I think it just came down to the, focus and the discipline. And even when I got to Nike, we had the Nike Tri-X watch had gotten very popular, and then we blew it out into all these different SKUs, and then we brought Fossil on board to do even more SKUs. And I got in there, and 20% of the line was doing 80% of the business. So, and then we had regions creating their own products, and it was just like a mess. So we had to flush the system, bring it back to a few core collections across running, outdoor, and women's, and the business grew. And then we went into Nike Plus after that. But
If you're confused in your business and all your products, your customer will be too.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what to buy.
yeah.
Focus it down.
I can tell you, as a reviewer, I'm confused when it's. Didn't you introduce that last week? It has a slightly. Somebody once said, "What'd you think of the XYZ 38C or whatever the model
Right.
number?" I said, "What is it?" I mean, there's just too much of
It's
it.
too much, right? And then one of the good things I learned at Nike, because they're great at connecting with the consumer and telling stories, is even though they have a lot of products, you can only really tell 1 or 2 stories a season anyways to the consumer. And even if it's not the best product in the world, as long as you get behind it as a brand and put all your messaging behind it, then the consumer, not the lemming effect, but they tend to believe you that you're confident in it, that it's gonna be the good product that they should buy. So I think it has a lot to do with confidence and how you present yourself.
Having said that, I want to get back to the role of the customer for a second. How big, or not how big, but how much attention should a company pay to the focus group, the beta tester? I mean,
Only focus on customers. After they have purchased your product, then talk to them. Don't talk to them before they bought the product. They don't have real insight. And especially if you're going into a new market.
why not?
Well,
'Cause
because
they're
they're seeing it
presumably
for the
potential
first,
customers.
they're seeing it for the first time. They don't understand what it is. You don't even have the marketing messages laid out. You literally have to be complete to actually have a really good study being done. Most of these studies that I saw back in the 90s, 90s was when it was done. We were at Philips, we did it all the time. And I just looked at it and I said, these things are crap. These studies are crap. We're taking a half-baked product idea with half-baked marketing, and usually not even marketing messages, just feature sets, and saying, would you like this for this kind of wide range of product with foam models on the desk? You're asking these people to imagine the future and how we might sell it to them to see if they want to buy it.
So does the usability lab have a place?
Usability is very different and usability, again, if you're designing for consumers, if you can't judge whether or not it's good, none of your potential, beta testers or whatever can actually tell if it's good either.
So that's a really interesting comment because I agree. I absolutely agree. We have the luxury of 6 million customers that we can do real live tests with a invitation group of several thousand. And while they may not be paying for a service, the real strong value that you get is observing what actual use does occur and how they're using it and dealing with any operational issues to make sure that you can get it right. So by the time we're finished with the beta test, we're rock solid on the execution. And in that process, you do your focus groups and you do your adaptive conjoint analysis and you do all that stuff to get to inform yourself better. And you start with a hypothesis and then you go try something in the marketplace. But nothing beats real customers with real products in their hands.
Right.
I just challenged this conjoint analysis. I've never seen it ever come up with anything very interesting. And to me, those are typically done by business professionals who don't trust their design teams well enough to give them some reason for their board so they don't look like bozos.
Right.
I've never seen this data before you ship an innovative product actually ratify what you're trying to do.
And a lot of times they can shift the accountability over to the focus group. Like if it fails, and it's the focus group's problem.
Exactly.
They said that we should do it.
Exactly.
But yeah, we tend to do research, but we do it like out in the field, like in the person's home or on the street.
At what stage? I mean,
Very early, but it's like usually when we're not the core consumer, and we can convince our client to do it, we'll go out in the field. We'll go, if we're designing some bags for basketball players, because I don't play basketball anymore. I did this at Nike where we just went down to Rogers Park, Compton, with the inner city and street ballers and found out what they wanted. And a lot of times it does birth like an insight that you may not have thought of. Like the bag may look exactly the same, but we didn't notice that they're putting all their bling in these Glad bags and putting it in their bag. So we put a plush pocket with embroidered diamond or something on there. Or they're always like getting distracted playing defense because they're always looking for their bag over on the sideline instead of getting stolen. So we put a lockdown kind of thing where it locked down the zipper and the whole bag to the stands or to the chain link fence. So those type of insights, bag probably would look the same, but without those insights, we wouldn't have been able to sell it and have the kind of crazy sell-through that we had at retail, like 60% of the seasonal sell-through in 2 weeks. And plus they were able to say, well, here's the Adidas bag and here's the Puma bag, but here's the Nike bag with the lockdown feature. And then, oh, yeah, I get it. And you're able to sell it in at a higher price point. So sometimes research is important, but we don't do that kind of like focus groups because usually that kind of kills a good idea.
So that's a really good example. What I mentioned before that I do magic, and one of the things about
you're going to do some tricks for us?
no, maybe later at the party. How can magicians fool anybody? And the reason is because you have untested assumptions that are buried in your subconscious, and so that's what fools you. Matter of fact, I have a really hard time fooling kids. I don't like to do kids magic because if I make something disappear with some phenomenal sleight of hand, the kid says, it's inside the secret flap in your skin. It's like, okay, no problem. But the smarter an adult is, believe me, the easier it is, the easier that person is to fool. So now one of the problems with some of the ethnographic market research is that the researchers themselves have mental models that they don't test and validate. And one of my favorite stories is, Iams, the health pet food store or company. They did some ethnographic research where they actually sent the researchers out to see how people feed their dogs healthy food and stuff. And they spent a long time out in the field, and they came back and were comparing notes during a multi-day sort of workshop. And at a break, one of the researchers said, hey, you're not going to believe one of the things I saw one of my families do. They actually had, our most premium healthy dog food, put it in a bowl, and then poured gravy on it. And instead of getting a laugh, the other researcher said, I saw the same thing. And they had both dismissed that behavior as unacceptable, and so that wasn't part of their research, when it turns out that every researcher saw that happen. So they concocted some dog gravy, and turns out, not a good market name, but it's called savory sauce. And it's in a healthy blend, it is a phenomenal seller. And it's because they could not see that outlier because it didn't fit the mental models. And so, all research is valuable, but it can only inform your innovative thinking. That's all it can do. And so you can choose to listen to it or not listen to it. It's not all good, but it's all.
I'm for insights,
Yes.
Yeah,
not for data. Insights.
Absolutely.
So when we started the company, we went to 500 homes. We took pictures of where everyone mounted their thermostats, how it worked. We asked a few questions. We asked installers what they liked, what they didn't like about it. So we asked a bunch of stuff like that. Absolutely, but we didn't go off and
Yeah.
take data.
Right.
We were looking for key insights.
Yeah, and did anything really sort of surprise you when you did that? That just completely blew away what you were thinking? In other words, how often do you, in the middle of it, say, you know what, I just didn't think about that?
Oh, there are a lot of times. There are a lot of times
Can
when you
think of
just
an
go.
Example?
I think there was a, we all have experienced this to a certain extent, but a lot of people on our team weren't married. But the whole fighting over thermostat, the marital war over the thermostat, and how can we best, best work on that, right? Are we going to be a marriage counselor, or are we going to try to push that responsibility to actually a team of people working together in the home? And so those are the kind of things that were really insightful of how we were going to do it. I don't want to give away some things we're working on, but
It's interesting because when we installed the app on my phone and my wife's phone, I was like, who's really
who's going to own it, right?
Yeah.
Who's going to own it?
'Cause I like it cold, and she likes it hot. Yeah.
I would think OnStar has a different appeal to the different genders.
It does. In a large part, it's about personal safety for you and your family, and so there's a lot more commonality in terms of that. Sometimes guys like the diagnostic reports that their vehicles email to them because it helps them keep their vehicle in tip-top shape, and women like that as well because it keeps their vehicle in tip-top shape. But you triggered a reminder of one of the early in-market tests that we did. Not a test; it was an actual product that we had, and it was stolen vehicle recovery. And we have that service now. If your vehicle's stolen and you do a police report, we'll actually locate the vehicle, and if it's in a high-speed chase, we'll slow it down, and all that kind of cool stuff. But in the very early execution of this, if the car was stolen and the alarm system thought the vehicle was stolen, it would automatically initiate police activities, and we thought that was very cool, and it was innovative. And until we got a note from the CEO of Harley-Davidson who said, hey, I love your Cadillac, love OnStar, but I was spread eagle on my car hood because I did something and the car thought it was stolen. So we disabled that aspect of it. So you learn from it and you adapt, and you keep going.
Karen, can you think of an example where talking to customers, talking to the people you work with, had you go in a completely different direction?
I think when we signed the Department of Corrections, the prison system in California, and they talked specifically about, I hadn't thought about this before, but if you think about prison systems, they're kind of a city within itself, right? And they can't run out of electricity because they can't do lockdowns. And so, we started thinking about that. So suddenly you start getting into this whole demand response. You start, we hadn't done that before, right? This was early on. This was kind of, well, we're just going to collect electricity data. We were going to help companies kind of baseline where they are, put in some reduction goals to be more energy efficient, et cetera. But we hadn't thought about the fact that we had to look at capacity. We had to look at the fact that if for some reason the grid was at capacity and they couldn't bring in the electricity requirements for that particular prison system, all hell will break loose, right? Because they couldn't do their lockdown, right? So that took us in a little different direction, which was really great, because now we started thinking about, well, you have to start doing some projections. You have to start thinking forward, and that was directly from the customer's experience. So I think that's probably the best example that I have from a customer perspective.
Nick,
You triggered another, you mentioned corrections, and you thought of
you
another
been there?
example. No, I haven't
Has
actually.
your daughter been there? No.
Daughter's
You
boyfriend
make
has.
me nervous.
So,
Don't touch my car either.
I mentioned the stolen vehicle slowdown. So
Yeah.
we said, hey, there's lots of high-speed chases that occur with stolen vehicles, and actually a lot of thefts occur as theft of convenience, and they take place at gas stations where you step out to pump your gas, you leave your keys in the ignition, the guy jumps in, takes off, and in a lot of cases we're actually tracking little Emily in the back seat because there's a car in the back seat and the guy wasn't smart enough to look at that. So this high-speed, this slowdown, this remote slowdown, stolen vehicle slowdown feature, we had thoughts about how it should work and how we should design it and how we should implement it and what the protocols ought to be. But then we said, okay, who's the customer here? The customer in this particular case actually is the state trooper or the police chiefs or the police association. So we really worked with many of them across the country. And it turns out that our initial instinct of having an Arnold Schwarzenegger voice saying, you are being tracked by law enforcement, not the right thing to do. You don't want the bad guys. You don't want the bad guys to know that anything happened. You want them to get disoriented, and so the car just stops functioning. Everything works. Power steering, power, everything works, except the only thing that doesn't work is the accelerator all of a sudden doesn't seem to be doing anything. They also
how does that affect the cars behind it?
Well, we only do it with the police behind it. We flash the taillights so that we all can agree that we're tracking the right vehicle, and they tell us it's safe to turn it off. And this whole protocol, and it's much more elaborate, which we don't get into all the details. We don't want all the bad guys knowing this stuff. But there is so much more robustness built into this than you can possibly imagine. And just another little detail, we cannot listen into the car, because if we could listen into the car, we could actually be creating a hostage situation. And so we don't want the bad guy to have any conception of what's going on other than there's a police behind me and the car's not working, oh, damn. And so there's a lot of thought that needs to go into it, and sometimes the customer can help you think through all those elements that you need to work on.
When do you know that a product, and I suspect the answer is it's an ongoing process, but at some point do you get that we're finished? As obviously with your thermostat, I know you're constantly adding features to it. You recently did. But at what point is it?
You have to pick a
it's
date.
out,
You
it's
just pick a
done?
date. And for me, my rule is, my first real project I ever worked on was at General Magic, and that was a 4-year endeavor. It started to be a 1 year, then it became a 2-year, a 3-year. You have to I say it's got to be 1 year and no more than 1 year, because your team can only have emotional attachment to this thing for about a year. You have to do everything you can and make sure that you have a plan to have a great product at the end of that year. And we all want to stay employed, so there's always innovation beyond that. But make sure you ship. Absolutely ship. Drawing out, delaying is the death of a team and ultimately the death of the product.
Yeah.
I mean, Google as famously puts out products as betas, and they're betas for 5 years.
That's a different death. Then your team never gets the idea of getting as close to perfection as you can in a time frame. They always just say, oh, it's just going to be beta. Yeah, it's fine. It's just beta. And no one treats it as a real product, and they don't put the passion
So is it
in
better to
finishing
call
it.
it 1.0 or 1.5 or 2.0, version 2.0 or whatever it is?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. You have to represent what, in the case of Google, most of their products are free, or at least notionally free. In the case where you're spending money for something, right, and putting it better be 1.0 or 2.0, and you're putting your reputation at stake and saying, yes, this is good, we stand behind it, right? And you can call somebody to complain. When it's free, it's very hard to complain.
I think beta just, again, reinforces that lack of confidence, too. It's like, you want to exude this confidence in the consumer so that they feel like they're buying
Absolutely correct.
something from a
Absolutely
company
correct.
that's going to stand behind it, evolve it. If something's wrong, it doesn't matter. Like, one of the things we learned on the Kickstarter project was that people are very forgiving as long as you're transparent with your own up to your mistakes, and hey, we'll fix it. Don't worry about it. I think that's very important, and instead of hiding when the problem comes out.
Yeah, and Twitter and Facebook, our
can't hide.
social pages are great for that because we can't hide from our customers. We have to address it right there, and it keeps the team on edge, right? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? Is the release good? What are the customers saying? And we want to react. We want to make sure, not react in a bad way, but to make sure we turn, because we are very proud of what we do, and we want to make sure it's a great experience for everybody. So having things like Twitter and Facebook are amazing tools to keep our teams really on the quality edge.
Right. Can you market this? Can you market design?
I think
mean,
it markets itself,
Yeah.
right? Because it's by word of mouth.
Yeah.
You can only do so much, and then people feel that, and then they tell others.
Yeah, I think one of the things I, again, learned on the Kickstarter with the, in case you guys didn't, is a little, I keep saying Kickstarter, but this was an idea that I had when the Nano came out, because I'd done all the watches at Nike for a number of years, but then I hadn't done watches in a while. And then the Nano comes out with this amazing breakthrough in size, multi-touch, and it's a clip that goes on your iPod that goes on anywhere, but they didn't really have a home for it. So I thought putting it on your wrist would be a natural place to put it. It was finally a size that was wearable, that didn't look like a big geek watch. And I think, you know, one of the things I found through the Kickstarter was that you end up putting it out there, and instant validation, global validation is really interesting when that, I guess you put it out to the world, you're not as worried about being rejected. And then, you know, you find out there's a lot more people in the world that want that. And one of the things that was interesting, because a lot of the other jobs I've had in the past where whether it was like, you know, Connect broke the iPad sales, but I'm sure iPad's going to break the Connect sales again. But it was an incredible, like, product, but you didn't know how much of it was design and how much was this technology that was selling it. Same thing at Nike. We did these watches that are great, you know, sellers, but is it the brand that's selling it or is it design? And what was interesting about this was that it was just me with no brand behind me, and just like, this is my idea. I don't know how many people want it. I'm trying to raise $15,000. Well, then, you know, after a month, we'd raised $1 million, and obviously there was a lot of people that wanted it, even though Apple Store and Incase and a bunch of other people said they weren't interested in it. So it proved that there was something, and it was marketing design, but I was doing nothing more than a homemade video and a couple renderings and stuff I do for every other client. Just, you know, basically I spent 2 weeks, $200 and a Sunday to make the video, and then that was it.
Right, right. By the way, we're going to take some questions from the audience, so if you have any, please come up to the mic and identify yourself.
An extremely interesting panel, thank you. My name is Dave Mucko with SkyBuilt Power, and we build rapidly deployable hybrid solar and wind power stations. You can drop on mountaintops and so forth. We constantly have these discussions in-house. Very small company. We have engineers and we have salespeople. Even to make it worse, I'm a lawyer. So, so the engineers continually say, we need to spend all our attention to make sure this never fails in the field. So we need to design, build, test, design, build, test, design, build, test. If you do that for every nut, bolt, screw, which has lots of parts, then the salespeople go crazy because they say, wait a minute, if we just had another salesperson, this thing works plenty well enough compared to the competition. Help me a little bit as to how you folks deal with that sort of stuff.
Well, from my perspective, we make sure we hire engineers who are pragmatic in terms of business. They think about business. And we hire salespeople who also appreciate design and understand that it's got to be right for the customer. And then we hire quality people who understand business. If you just have pure engineering or pure research, those kinds of functions I think are so outdated nowadays. You need to have system thinking in every single domain of your company. Now, there's obviously strengths in one area, but they all have to be thinking and working together, because otherwise you're going to have these engineers who just want to over-engineer, or these salespeople who will sell something half-baked. And so I think it's just
the finance guy says you got to meet your next
you got to
quarter.
meet your, you know, that's exactly what happened to GM, right? GM was run by finance at the end of the day, and it fell off the cliff, and now it's finally getting designed back and everything else. So you have to really be able to balance all of those things, and it really takes the CEO to set the cultural tone of that, regardless of whether they're a lawyer, a designer, or an engineer, or what have you. They have to be able to make sure they balance all of the different opinions around the table and go, no, that seems a little extreme. And hopefully they have trusted people that they have around them that they can rely upon to know when you've gone a little bit too far or not far enough in one direction.
Right. Nick, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, again, I completely agree. Tony's characterization that it's about systems design. And so going back to the notion of idealized design, sort of what is that checkmate that's in your mind? You need to know what that is. The team needs to understand what that is, and they need to have that 1-year time deadline so that we can get as close as we can to that ideal. And so you're always moving in the right direction. And then as a leadership team, as the CEO, you say, is the closest approximation to the ideal that we can execute on time, is that good enough for this business? And you make a judgment call, and you live with it. And you can't have perfect engineering robustness. You can't have perfect design. You can't have perfect everything, because if it was perfect everything, probably you couldn't afford it.
You guys are all obviously very successful, but can you own up to something that didn't work? What was the biggest design snag that you guys ran into that you're willing to share with us here? I know.
You mean
I know
recent?
I know you're otherwise perfect, but
No, there's definitely.
There's a lot of things, but early on in my career, I learned a lot. We failed tremendously at General Magic, and we learned a lot. Right? We learned an amazing amount of setting the goals, making sure we have management. We hated managers there. There was all kinds of things that we learned. Something recent. Sometimes you put a little bit too much trust in certain maybe suppliers. Or
Yep.
certain channel partners, or that you think they get it, but they really don't.
Right.
And so you really have to make sure, for me, is make them a part of your culture and bring them in and train them and adopt them, and not just think they, just because they're nodding doesn't mean they understand what you're saying.
I think that's
who
one
was
of the.
responsible on the first iPhone, which I liked, but one of the things that I didn't like was that if you had a third-party headphone, certain headphones would not plug into the hole.
Once again, there's a opinion-based
Trade-off,
design, and there are a couple people with an opinion, strong. We got
I think-
where we got.
At least my exposure to Apple, which I have a lot of friends that work there and still, and one of the things I always respected about what Apple did was they kind of partnered with their suppliers and invested in stuff, whereas Motorola and a couple of the other companies I worked for, they tend to treat suppliers as, vendors and just, give us what you want and then just keep lowballing. I think you guys invested in their suppliers quite a bit.
Invested, because that's a key innovative technology is investing in your suppliers. But Scott is not really telling you the whole story, because we actually worked together on Nike Plus. When we were doing Apple iPod, we did Nike Plus. We did a lot of the engineering. They did a lot of software. So we actually had very similar cultures, but they were still, even from a branding perspective, seems similar, but we had very different ways of thinking, and we brought both teams together and really worked really hard to bring out what became Nike Plus.
Yeah, actually, a little known story was that me and Ed Boyd kind of helped start the, who's at Dell now, head of design. We actually did an MP3 player, solid state MP3 player, based on the insight that everybody was using solid state, like 70% of the people were using solid state, music back before the iPod for fitness, and everything was this precious little box, and so we made this kind of rubberized, kind of sport appropriate thing with Philips, and we actually had like #1 MP3 player in the market for at least 6 months. and then we're telling Philips, like, guys, we can't use Music Match anymore as our download music manager. We have to do our own thing and control the experience. And no, Music Match is fine. And then Tony came along, and then we were gone. We were like within the next, and then Best Buy dropped us. It was over. But that was probably one of the biggest mistakes. I mean, that we couldn't convince our partner to actually take it seriously. It was like a moonlight, like me and Ed at night trying to design an audio business for Nike.
We had an interesting experience that I would put in the bucket that we talked about earlier of not the appropriate focus of the portfolio of products that you've got. Interestingly enough, back in 12 years ago, back in 2000, we had the ability for customers, and this was in market, customers could receive and send emails while they were driving. They could check stock quotes while they were driving. They could do all kinds of things while they were driving. And it was very innovative, very sort of leading edge, very techno-geeky, and all of our engineers loved it. Our IT guys loved it.
When the engineers love it, there might be an issue.
And it was confusing our customers
always
because
scary.
we would get to the end of the trial period and do you want to subscribe to the service? And a lot of customers would say, no, I don't need to do emails while I'm driving, so I don't need that. Well, what about the part where it saves your life? And I didn't know it does that. I didn't know about the door unlock feature. So we overwhelmed our customers, and it wasn't clear to them what our brand represented, what our service really was all about. And so we sort of, stepped back from all of that ultra niche stuff and focused on providing simple solutions. And actually, one of the best mistakes we've ever avoided is not adding extra buttons to our system. We got a very simple product: a blue button for talking to a live advisor when you need it, a red button for an emergency situation, and a little phone button to do some voice-based stuff if you want that, and some hands-free calling. That's it. And it's intuitive. Even I was telling some folks at one of the breaks, 4-year-olds know to press the button when their mom or dad's in trouble when they're driving.
Right. Karen, I know you've had a perfect pass, but I'll let you weigh in too. But we're down against the clock, so if any of you have questions, please come on up to the mic. But Karen, why don't you tell us about
My
a
failures.
blemish or two in your past?
Well, I'll let this gentleman ask his question. But I mean, just real quickly, I think anytime you're developing software, there's always, the first time out of the gate, it's probably not designed well. It's probably a little overwhelming for the customer. I think we did that because we were dealing with a very complex set of information that we were trying to convey back to the customer. So, we had to go back and redesign our interface. And so that was something that we had to learn pretty quickly. And we've done so since then, and now it's more intuitive and much more digestible for the end user. So
Okay, great.
there's my tiny little mistake.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I was wondering, do you think that every product company should have a head of design position, or indeed every company?
I think if you're designing any kind of product or product experience, I think it really, our best clients and the products that we're most proud of that we show and actually have the most traction in the PR and market are ones where we have a design champion, at the very least have a head of design that's going to fight the fight. And this is speaking from an outside consultant, because I've been on both sides of the fence. It's very important to have that voice at the table within a corporation in order to, basically diffuse those problems that come up along the way. You never know when something's going to come out of left field to kind of, ruin the experience. So you need to be there to fight the fight, and it's always better to, there's no such thing as a pure design vision that always comes to market. It's an art of compromise along the way, and if you don't have somebody in there at the table kind of figuring out what the best solution is, along with the engineers, along with marketing and manufacturing, then it usually goes off the rails, I'd say.
Are you guys taking resumes?
I would say that in every company there needs to be sort of a provocateur design thinker who has the ear of the senior leadership to, ask the challenging questions, to bring in sort of the very nascent early customer perspectives on things. And back in the medieval days, there was the court jester who had that unique role, and I think every company today needs a corp jester.
Yeah. And you look at some of the successes like Jawbone and Jawbone and Fuse Project, Yves Behar, Ammunition, Bob Bruner, and Beats by Dre. You got Nest and Fred Bold and who else is HTC bought One & Company. I mean, these are all guys that have went and they own their category now. Like Beats owns like 55% of the headphone market. You got HTC that was an ODM that now is like actually arguably one of the best Android phones out there. They've moved up the food by partnering with the design and in some way, whether it's external or internal. It's very important, and it's no secret, but yet a lot of companies are having a hard time emulating that, which is surprising. But.
They think they don't understand systems design. They don't understand systems thinking that has to permeate everything. And so you have to build a culture of that. And you could be a services business, and you still have to think about design and about the user experience or the customer experience of your service. So you need to have some kind of champion inside. But I agree that you can sometimes, and we even do this with marketing, we have to use outside firms. We can't do everything as a small company inside. But we have to have that appreciation for it and to understand when to pull it in and to work with others who have a palette of things, who are more or less on the cutting edge, to bring that in to help with our decision-making process.
Okay, I'm going to have to, we're right up against it. Do we have a final word from Karen or Nick? Nope? Okay, well then
No,
I want
we
to
gotta
thank
go to the gala.
our panel. Very, very enlightening.